Hello, this is Luke Turner, and welcome back to another episode of Building a Web App from Scratch. Today we're going to continue working on this exercise tracking web app. Let's first do our usual stuff of launching the app here. I'm going to start the database. Actually, I just remembered I have to launch Podman first here. Let's get that done. Wait for it to start. Okie doke. Now we can run the database. We can run the client-side bundler, and then we can run the server. And then once this loads, we can open the app in our browser. Okie doke. So I feel like today I'm just going to check some things off of my to-do list here. So let's look back at this notes page. And we have basically two sections in the to-do list. One is next actions, which is sort of like cleanup tasks or things that are not really adding new features so much as improving things or fixing problems. And then there's this ideas section, which is more around like adding functionality. So kind of looking through this here, improving error handling UX, that's an important thing to do. But we did spend a fair bit of time on error handling stuff yesterday, or last week. So I kind of want to do something a little different. A new user onboarding flow, that could be an interesting thing. Redirect to edit exercise page. Consistent use of iconography. I kind of want to address some of these. Support duration other than minutes. That's going to be a pretty significant change, actually, but probably important. So let's actually just get started here. I'm going to skip these error ones. Let's think about improving the onboarding flow when a new user is created. So let's sign out for a moment here. Pretend we're a new user, okay? We sign in, and we get redirected to this today page, and this is what we see. And if I was a new user, even this add new sets button, there's not going to be any options listed here to begin with because I haven't configured any exercises. So kind of what I want to do is have a banner for new users to sort of explain what they're looking at and what they should do first. So as usual here, we're going to open up the Bulma docs, take a look at their components for notifications. I think notification seems like a pretty good option here. It could even have an X, and the user could click the X to make it go away. We also use notifications, I believe, like in our settings page for these danger zone type of things. So I might kind of replicate that here. Not sure what's up with that little black bar in the top right. Is that part of the app? Don't really know. Maybe I think that's actually just part of Chrome because I can see it there as well. Kind of weird. But anyway, okay, so let's kind of go ahead and copy one of these notification blocks here. And in the today page, which is the first page that the user is going to be shown, we're going to put in this block at the top. And I think it makes sense to have it even above the page select, but below the actual nav bar, of course. And what we're going to put in there is something we have to figure out. Let's just take a look at this. So we've got our notification, and we don't really need a title. And also this isn't really a danger thing. It should be more of like a, I guess it doesn't really matter. We could just do is primary here. and then we can put in some content. And I'm going to add that delete button in here as well. So that would be a button dot delete, and we're going to make this interactive. So I'm going to add a data signals onboarding notification equals true, and data show onboarding notification. Let's just copy that. And then with this button, we're going to have data on click onboarding notification equals false. So now, in theory, when I open this up, it's going to have this thing. There's a close button. I click the close button, it goes away. Pretty simple. There's another element here too, though, where it's like, when do we show this in the first place, right? So we only want to show this when a user is onboarded for the first time. But I don't necessarily want to add a column. Sometimes, so taking a step back, when you're building an app, there's kind of a few different options here that I've seen. One is you can actually have fields on the user table where you can say, has the user been shown this message and stuff like that. And then if the user clicks X on it or whatever, it's like you actually update the database to say, okay, don't show this to that user anymore. And that's fine. But it does require some additional column in the database, which there's nothing really wrong with that, I guess. Another option, which is pretty common, it seems like at companies, is to have a totally separate tool that handles these. Something where it's like tracking users on the front end, and then there's like a separate app, like Pendo, for example, maybe, where it's like you can configure onboarding notifications and manage those for each user. And, there's a lot of complexity and feature richness in those, user tracking type of apps. Like you can show notifications to the user based on what they've done in the past, things like that. Like they used this feature before, show them a notification that there's like a new version of that feature, things like that. Obviously, we don't want anything in that level of detail. And also for personal apps, I try and avoid actually tracking my users very granularly. Obviously, there's server-side tracking, and I tend to be interested in like just number of unique users, which is visible purely from the server. But I try and stay away from that JavaScript side tracking. Like Google Analytics and so on. Okay, so there is another option in this case, though, and that's kind of what I'm going to go with here, which is we can kind of tell if the user has used the app before, but based on whether or not they have any exercises configured already. So this dialog will only be shown to users who don't have any exercises yet in the system. And if they don't create any and leave and come back, they'll be shown the same dialog again, which might actually be a good thing. So what we're going to do here is adjust the default data signal value. So it's going to be set to true if the user has no exercises and false otherwise. So we're going to need to load something into the view for that, but let's just say sets exercises. Do we have? Yeah, so actually we have exercises in here, and that should be an array, I believe. So we can say exercises.length equals 0. If so, do true, true, otherwise false. And then I think I might have to put this in parentheses. So now if I refresh this as a user, I don't really like that flash. That needs to not be a thing. So to avoid that flash, I'm actually going to avoid rendering this whole block instead. So this is just going to default to true. And by the flash, I don't know if it even comes through in the stream, but when I refreshed the page, the notification popped up for an instant because it's rendered in the DOM. But then the JavaScript client, the JavaScript library data star loaded, and this data show attribute came into effect, and it hid that element of the DOM. But for a moment, that element was visible, which is what we don't want. So I'm going to do like if exercises.length equals 0, then we render it. We can get rid of some of these white spaces. So now when I refresh here, there should be no flash of content. And if I go to manage exercises and open this everything exercise and delete it, thus kind of simulating that new user, and go back to the today page, now I should see that notification. And this is kind of the pattern that I'll use probably for all of these onboarding tips. If I do add any more, is it's like guiding the user through the setup that's necessary, and the notification continues to appear until the setup is complete. And in this case, the setup is adding exercises. Okay, so now we need to figure out what to actually write in there. It looks like there's no need to have like a content block underneath. We can kind of just start writing. And I believe in Pug, you use like this thing, test. I can never remember how to just put like plain old text in there. Okay, yeah. So got to kind of think about what we want to say. First, like a quick introduction, and then we can say something like the first, or like this, an app to that helps you track. Might be a bit obvious, but that's fine. Okay. And then we can make this a link. I think we can do like an A type thing here. Alternatively, we could maybe do like open the, and then do this A, and then do this. I kind of want to see how that works. Okay, it does work, but it doesn't have the spacing right. What about now? Okay, that's good. And then this is going to be ref/exercises. We can call this like the manage exercises page, maybe. And create the exercises that you want to track. Then come back to the today page you're currently on and add sets for the exercises to track. Well, let's just leave it at that for now. And I could say the one you're currently on. Or like then when you do any exercises, or when you want to track your exercises, Okay, should be fine. And I might put a thing where it's like, this is an app that helps you track exercises, but it looks like you don't have any exercises to track yet. And I might do some paragraphs here. I want to put in some line breaks. So like this would be paragraph, and then here I might do indent, something like this. Well, it's not putting any spacing in there. Do I need some kind of content? Like this? I wonder if I could just add that to this notification.content like that, so that it actually, has the proper spacing between paragraphs. Just adjusting the phrasing here a little bit. It's hard for me to talk and type at the same time, so while I'm writing this stuff, I'm going to be a little quieter probably. Okay. And, I could put more detail in here, but I'm kind of hoping that it's going to be fairly intuitive where, if I go to manage exercises, it's like, okay, click manage exercises, takes me here. I'm like, oh, I need to create a new exercise. Do it. So there's another to do where it should open that edit page for that exercise already. And that's what I'm going to do next. But assuming it immediately took us here, then the user sees these parameters right away. And so I don't feel like I need to necessarily explain when you create an exercise, you have to define the parameters for that, which indicates what values you want to be tracked. Because hopefully when they come here, that's going to be kind of obvious. They're like, oh, I need reps. I don't know. Doesn't need to be perfect anyway. Usually when you're onboarding users with like flows like this, a big part of that is gathering user feedback and doing user testing. Like actually, one of the things that I particularly like is to actually watch a user use your app and not assist them in any way, just observe what they get stuck on and kind of help understand that users, like how the app looks to them, kind of stepping outside your biased perspective as the programmer. But I don't actually have any users. And also for an app like this, where it's just a hobby, I'm not actually going to take the time to do that to begin with. So I'm just going to do something and hopefully it's good enough. One other thing here is this exercises.length. Like this add new sets thing here. If I go back and delete that exercise again, delete. The add new sets, it's got this weird, it's just, not only can you not use it, but it just looks strange because the select has no options in it. And for some reason it's rendered as like this tiny little widget. And so I'm just going to remove that. So, we're just going to have like if exercises.length is 0 or is not 0, let's say, then put it in there. Otherwise don't. So now this is what the user is going to see. And looking at this, I actually kind of want to put this below maybe the date thing, like that. Yeah, seems like that makes sense to me. Okay, and so what I'm going to do now is commit that. So we're just changing some things in this pug file. Add onboarding notification for users without any exercises. Cool. And before we forget, let's just check that off in our notes file here. And then we're also going to do this redirect thing because that's relevant to this onboarding flow. So let's take a look at the create an exercise route. So that's post/exercises. And here, instead of redirecting to /exercises, we're going to redirect to /exercises/ and I'm going to use the template string syntax here. And we're going to do, we're going to need to actually get this exercise. And it's going to be exercise.id. And what is fields? I don't think that's what I want. I think I'm going to need to put in a returning, like maybe it's like another thing on here. I don't really remember .returning. And I think just like that. And can I feel like I've done this in some other place too. Yeah. The thing is, I don't really need to return everything. What is this saying? Oh, it's saying it could be an array, which I guess is true. So let's just extract the 0th value from that array. We know that there's only ever going to be one value. There should always be one value. And if there's not, this should throw an error. I'm just kind of going to assume that's the case. I don't think this insert is ever going to return as though it succeeded, but with 0 rows. Okay, so now, again, imagining we're a new user, we sign in, we get to this page, open the manage exercises, create a new exercise. That takes us to this page. And here we can, set our things and click update. And one of the things I'm noticing here as well is when I click update, I want that to take me back to the exercises page. So let's actually kind of improve this flow a little bit more. That would be the update route for an exercise, which is post this one here. And so here, this is going to redirect actually back to the exercises page. So now, if I check off these things and click update, it's going to take me back here. And because we're kind of changing that behavior a little bit, I might also rename that button. So let's open the exercise layout. Let's rename that from update to, where even is that? Oh, here. Going to rename that from update to like save changes or something like that. So now, you click save changes and it takes you back here. Seems fine. Okay. Hi, what lib framework uses a pug file? Yeah, so I'm using Express on the back end, and Express is kind of a lightweight server. And, you can sort of see here, these are all Express controllers. And Express supports a variety of different templating libraries that you can use to render your HTML. So I could use plain HTML here, but I'm actually using Pug to kind of make it easier to write all of that. So Pug in and of itself is like a standalone library that you can use with a variety of different frameworks, so to speak. And this is also my first time using Pug in Anger and for a real app. And I gotta say, I mean, it's nice and terse, but it is a little bit annoying in some ways. I'm used to doing front-end work using React or like a similar kind of JavaScript-based library, and I do kind of prefer that. Part of the problem with Pug is that it has so it has like block like layouts. So like we have this global layout here where you can define all of the shared HTML, and then pages can inherit from that. And it also has like mixins where you can define almost like functions that you can then use in your templates and kind of keep the templating a bit more dry. But that almost like functions is kind of important because they're really not functions, and it has some disadvantages in compared to something where it's like you can actually compose mixins, which is not really possible in Pug. And yeah, not the best. But you know, if you think about it less as like a programming language and more as like a simple templating language, it works fine. I'm also using a front-end library called DataStar. So where you see these like data signals attributes on here, these are, you know, just defining regular old HTML attributes in Pug, but then those attributes are interpreted by DataStar and used to add interactivity to the app. So this is sort of like a low JavaScript approach, not no JavaScript, but the whole app isn't rendered purely with JavaScript. It's mostly rendered server side. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm trying to think, should I just commit these changes now? Yeah, I'm just going to commit these now. So, you know, we're adjusting this redirect and adjusting this other redirect as well. And then in the exercise page, we're changing the text of this button. And I'm just going to call this like adjust how redirects work when editing exercises. No need to be too specific. Okay. And one other thing I'm kind of thinking, so when I'm in here, looking at this exercise, what's not necessarily obvious is how to get back to the Manage Exercises page. I mean, as a user, I know, or, you know, as the programmer of the app, I know that like clicking this is going to take me back. But it would be nice if there was like a kind of back or cancel button that you can use to go back without actually saving those changes at all. So I might go ahead and add that. Like really just right next to that Save Changes button. I might add another one, and I think that would be another control. When you see me do this plus business, that's actually using the like the mixin. So there's like a control mixin here, and we're using that. And part of the reason we're using these mixins is to sort of simplify the implementation of the Bulma CSS framework. So for the UI stuff, we're using Bulma to kind of give it a standard theme and avoid having to write a lot of CSS. And the problem with Bulma is that it, being a CSS only framework, it doesn't use JavaScript. It has some boilerplate where it's like you have to write a bunch of nested elements in some cases and things like that with specific classes. So some of that is abstracted using the Pug mixins to avoid repeating ourselves. But there's also an element of like, I just often don't remember exactly how to do things with Bulma without checking the docs a bunch of times. So, which I'm going to need to do right now to see how to put multiple things together in a horizontal form. I guess a form group maybe. So if we look at the control mix in here, that has a field in it. And then we have the ability to add attributes to that. And so what we can do is add like class equals form group, like that. And then I think that's going to do what we want here. Not quite. Oh, is grouped, right? Is grouped. Still doesn't look quite right. So, okay, so the problem is even within that field, we need multiple controls. So this control mixin is not actually going to work for that. And this is kind of a good example of where plug mixins are a little annoying. I'm actually just going to have to not use that mixin for this particular case because I don't want to have to make it. I don't want to have to make this mixin support multiple fields or multiple controls. Kind of part of the problem with mixins is it's like you can accept parameters and then it can also accept a block, which like is right here, which is like the content that goes within it. But you can't actually have multiple blocks, which is something that I find a little bit annoying because it limits your ability to have really well abstracted mixins. They're only useful in certain cases. Anyway, so control and is grouped. And then we have a field. And in that is the input. And then there's another field. And in that is the other input. Something like that. Or no, I got that backwards. This is field.isGrouped. And then we have a control. And then we have another control, right? Yeah, okay, fine. And then this other one is going to be not a submit. In fact, this can just be an a link. And it's going to just take us back to exercises. And it's just going to say back. And then the other thing is we probably want to style these a little bit differently. Like we want, you know, this is primary on the submit. It's probably a good way to do it. Yep. And I'm noticing here they have like a kind of like this gray on the cancel, which seems to be from this is light. So we're just going to add that as well. And now we have something like this. And really, you know, maybe it should be on the right, but I'm not going to go that far at the moment. So now we've added this back button. So we can save our changes, you know, uncheck things, or let's just change this to make it obvious, save changes. Or we can, you know, do something and not save those changes by clicking back. One other thing I kind of like to do sometimes is add breadcrumbs. Like for instance, in this manage exercises page, if you click here, there's, you know, this title, which in and of itself probably should be clickable so that somebody can easily use that link as a way to, you know, copy that link or whatever. It's not really that big of a deal, but it's often a convention to have the title be clickable. And the other thing I kind of think would be nice is breadcrumbs, which Bulma has a component for. So we should be able to implement that without too much difficulty. Breadcrumb. And the idea with breadcrumbs is if you have like a hierarchy of pages, or you have like a page like exercises and then sub pages, one for each exercise, you can represent that hierarchy with breadcrumbs so the user can kind of see where they are in the app. And that's something that I'd like to add here. So it's interesting that this is in a nav. Are they always in a nav? I guess so. It's kind of, I guess that sort of makes sense semantically, even though it's not the nav bar, it's navigation, right? So let's go ahead and add that. That would be in our layout probably, because we're going to want similar things on different pages, although it might be a bit of a pain to put it in the layout. For now, let's just try putting it here and see what that looks like. So we have our title, and I'm just going to put it above the title for now, and then we're going to combine them together. So nav.breadcrumbs. And, we could add that ARIA label. I don't know exactly what that does, but it helps with screen readers, accessibility. So whenever the Bulma docs include an ARIA declaration, I always try and include that in my app as well. I've never actually used, there's some tools where you can like test out what your app would look like to a screen reader user. And, for a real app like a SaaS that you're selling, that would probably be a good thing to do, just to be accessible to everybody. But for an app like this, I'm not very concerned about that at the moment. Another thing kind of similar to that is localization, where it's like you probably would want to localize your app so that you can have it in multiple languages. And that's another thing where I'm just like, I'm not fussed about it because I'm never going to implement another language for this app. So adding localization is not worth the time, even though it's usually considered a good practice. So within the navigation, it looks like there's a UL, an unordered list, and then we have list elements for each of the crumbs. And within those is a link. So let's say like link, and then a ref equals exercises. And this would be, call it manage exercises for consistency with the title of the link in the nav bar. And let's just see what that looks like. So we've got that. And then, kind of the question is, so sometimes I like to actually have the nav bar be located alongside the title of the page. So not on top of, but next to. But I'm not sure how well that's going to work here. So we're just going to have it on top, and it's going to be a bit redundant, but that's okay. And we're going to have another list. And then here we're going to have this. And, we're going to just do this again. This is basically the URL for the current page. And this will be exercise.name. And we have to use an equals to tell Pug that we're interpreting this as a JavaScript expression instead of just a string. So instead of putting exercise.name in there literally, it's going to evaluate exercise.name and put in the, whatever's stored in that value. Okay. Oh, okay. I was wondering why it looked weird, but it's not breadcrumbs. It's breadcrumb for some reason. Fine. So now we have manage exercises / our exercise. And we could add this is active, which basically is going to make that link not clickable, I believe. So I can't, I'm clicking on that and it's not actually doing anything. And then this ARIA current thing, I guess, is sort of similar for screen readers. Okay. So, and there's this other question of like, well, where do we want that? I mean, I could put it actually in the nav bar maybe, since we do kind of have all of this space here. An important thing to consider, though, is what it's going to look like in the mobile view. So this app is responsive. Kind of one of my assumptions is if people are editing exercises, they're going to need to do that on their phone, probably. Like they're going to be at the gym or something, and they're going to want to be able to access the app on their phone. It's not really a desktop only app. So if we switch to responsive view here, you can see now the header is like this, like all of the navigation has been collapsed into this hamburger menu. And so given that, it maybe doesn't really make sense to have the breadcrumbs in the header, at least in the mobile view. The other thing is, it's like, is this redundant with the title? Perhaps. But I don't really want to get rid of the title either. Makes me wonder if we should just not have breadcrumbs for now. Small, medium, large. What if we try just making it smaller? I always like to experiment with these kind of things, just kind of see what feels right. Okay, that's, I can't even read that. That's definitely not what I'm looking for. What about larger? That's starting to get to the point where we feel like maybe we could even get rid of the title. Let's do that. What does this look like now? Is that better? I don't know. I don't know if I really like that. I really don't like that this is still blue, despite not being clickable. I'm not a fan of that at all. I wonder if there's a way to adjust that. I don't know. But I also do like this. Like, well, it's fine, I guess. So say we do that. Then, if we were to go to the settings page, we would probably want to have the same thing here where it's just a breadcrumb that says settings. And if you go to manage exercises, it would just be a breadcrumb that says manage exercises and so on. The today page is a bit of a special case where we probably wouldn't want breadcrumbs at all. This page, is kind of optimized for basically being the most frequently viewed page in the whole app. Users are going to spend most of their time here, adding sets and then configuring those sets. And so I don't really want to add unnecessary breadcrumbs here or just unnecessary anything. The other thing is there's this historical data page. So, yeah, let's do it. Let's go ahead and give the breadcrumbs a shot. Well, I really don't like that. It's not even fitting. If I switch this to responsive, at what point does it stop fitting? Yeah, that's kind of not great. What if I just switch that to normal? Still not great. Let's just call this a failed experiment for now. We don't really need these breadcrumbs. It seems like it's going to be hard to fit it into the UI of the app, at least at the moment. Okay, and I can switch this back to, something. Yeah, I do kind of wish there was something, but whatever. You can always just click back, basically. Okay, and so then we also have this history page. And here I kind of want to have a back button of some kind as well. And in this case, it would probably just be like below the title. Let's try that and see what that looks like. So, it's going to be something kind of similar to this. Let's kind of copy this whole field, go to historical, and it would be below the title. And we don't have the submit, and we don't need the is grouped. So we could just make this a plus control here. So that's what that looks like in responsive or in mobile view. In the desktop view, because it's a form field, it is put in a weird spot. So I might actually just put the button like this. And then in the, yeah. Maybe I'll just do it like this. Without the horizontal field, what'll that be like? So now, it's got the proper padding, which is good. And it's kind of like in the right spot in both places. Doesn't feel the best though. Especially in the desktop view, I kind of wish it was here. Or even above it. What would it look like above it? Above the title. And we would also put it above that look back drop down. Yeah, I kind of like that actually. Let's think of it like that. Go back. If you go here, there's a back here. I almost want to put one up there as well, but let's see what that looks like actually. So let's go over here. Or actually, let's just copy this bit, this exact same thing. Put it in the exercise tab. Refresh. So now there's a back button there. I think that's fine. And doing that, I'm actually going to get rid of this back button too. You only need so many. In which case this doesn't need to be is grouped and it can go back to being just a plus control. Okie doke. Seems fine. Back. Okay. And this page, there really isn't anything to go back to. Same with manage exercises. There's nothing here to really go back to. And with settings page, I could see having a back button here that takes you back to today. I'm also going to update the settings page here to have, well, let's commit these first. So get rid of the breadcrumbs part. I think that I prefer the back button. And we're going to say, let's do this. Let's actually do 2 commits here. So we're going to stage adding the back button, and also in this file, adding the back button. And we can call this add back buttons on exercise specific pages. What else is going on here? That, yeah, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. And then there's this other thing where it's making this save changes button primary. And I want to do the same thing in settings here, where this submit button here would be is primary, and it would be called save changes. And really, thinking about it, I guess this might make sense to take somebody back to today when they click back. ideally we would keep track of where they were before they clicked the settings page, and then the back button would take them there. But for now, I'm just going to have a back button that takes them back to today. And ultimately, if we want to make it fancier, we can later. So this would be today. So now, you can click back, get you back to today, or you can go settings. You can click save changes, and that's just going to save the changes and not do anything else. Do we want that to take you back to today as well? Is an interesting question. Let's do it. So in the settings page, there's like a post settings, which is where we update our settings. And this is going to redirect us actually back to the today page instead of redirecting us back to the settings. So now, I open settings, I can either go back without saving, or I can change something and click save changes, and it's going to take me back. I also kind of want like a little bit of separation around this export my data option here. It kind of feels like part of the same form as everything else, which it's not. I really don't like these card boxes though. I feel like that just looks kind of weird. I wonder if I could try like a block just to give it a bit more space here. So like there would be a block. What does that look like? And then I would have like another block here, I guess. Yeah, so that's giving it a bit more space, which I actually like. I could also do like an HR type of thing, like just a line, but that feels like not quite what I'm looking for. I might actually put that in a notification as well. Let's do that. So let's get rid of those blocks. And then here we're going to do like dot notification is something. Let's just see what that looks like here. Yeah, I think that's fine. And I'll change the color here, make it something a little bit, actually kind of like that. Light colors. I kind of like that one. But I feel like my gray is darker than that gray. So if I get rid of the is light, ironically, is that going to make it lighter? Yeah. Okay, this seems fine. Got some separation in there now. And it's not aligned anymore with that, which is because there's more padding, presumably, on the left here, but that's okay. It is aligned with the one below it, at least. Okay, so let's commit that as well. Whatever. I'm not going to granularize this. Let's just say adjust settings page and button styles when editing. Sure. And one other thing too that I noticed while we're thinking about onboarding new users is, so let's actually delete my account here. Delete my account and then create a brand new account. We get our nice thing here. If I go to the settings page, I don't like this, kilograms and miles. Like the units are not consistent. And because, I mean, you could argue maybe it should be metric because metric is better. I don't know. But personally, I use kilograms, or I use miles and pounds, imperial units, because I live in the US. So that's what I'm going to default these to. So I need to change the default for weight unit to pounds. And I'm not even sure where exactly that default is coming from. Like, let's actually do an exercise here. And we can select weight and distance, because those are two things that use those units. And if we go to the today page, add a new set here. So here it actually is pounds and miles. But here it says kilograms and miles. Now, if I switch this to pounds and switch it back to kilograms, then this is going to, it should have been updated to kilograms. Oh, I didn't save it. Click save. Now it says kilograms. That might be something nice in the settings page, actually, if you didn't even need to save your changes, if there was an AJAX update to the back end whenever you just changed one of these values. Similarly to how we have over here, like if I set, open the network tab, if I set like 123, that is immediately updated without me needing to click anything. Maybe I'll do that next. But for now, my kind of question is like, why does this default to kilograms when that other thing was defaulting to pounds, right? So let's actually delete our account again so we can see that default state. Sign in with GitHub. Okay. So if we look at let's open Table Plus here. Take a look at what we have in the database. We have a user. That user has a null preferred units column. So the preferred units is where these values are stored. And so presumably, because that's null, we have inconsistent default behavior in some of the parts of the app. So like in the settings page, weight is the one that's a problem here. This is a select mixin, and it's using weight units. And so presumably it's just like the first thing in weight units is the one that is being selected here. If we actually look at the mixin or select, we can see that there is a default value. But in this case, because user.preferred units is null, the default value is just going to be null as well. And so it ends up just selecting the first value in that weight units array, presumably. Which if we look at the settings page, data here, weight units is based on the order that's being returned by this units function here. So here we can see it's like in theory, if I move this up like that, so that it's imperial first and then metric, and then refresh this page, it's going to say pounds and miles. But that's kind of a weirdly implicit thing. I am going to change that order there, but there's no guarantee that when we look over here, actually creating an exercise, that it's going to be aligned with those settings in the settings page. Like this says pounds and miles, but the logic that's selecting that is somehow different. And that, I believe, is based on this default unit function. So really, probably what I should be doing is using that default unit function in the settings page here. So default unit is going to be, it accepts the data type and the user. So this would be like data type is weight and user. And this, well, actually this one is distance. And the same thing up here, except with weight. And now the order of that other function shouldn't actually matter. So let's take a look at this. If we go to the settings page, refresh here, we get pounds and miles. If we put this back and refresh here again, it should still just be pounds and miles because it's using that default units instead of implicitly using the order of this array. So that seems fine. Now, you could argue that we should actually set this value in the database. So when a new user is created, set that preferred units explicitly instead of just having it be null. The kind of problem with that, and I'm sure that's possible somehow, but the problem with it is when the user is actually created, that's happening within this auth middleware business. So it's like this piece of behavior here, which is from the better auth library. And I don't really, there might be options in there to adjust the default values for the created user. Or I could say like whenever a page is loaded, if the user doesn't have this object in default units, then set it to a default value. But I'm not going to worry about that really. This seems to be okay for now. As long as we're using that default units function wherever we need to check the units, then we should be fine. And we could kind of confirm that as well. Like if we look at the settings page, it's looking at user.preferred units. If I actually search for that, we can see that the only places that's actually being accessed is now in this default units function. And even I could do that. And, we're going to get some noise here from our migrations and stuff, but we can see like this is where we're setting preferred units when that's being updated. And then here, it's just a schema, default unit, and that's it. So we don't actually have anything else accessing that value. So now we're nice and consistent. Let's, I'm going to commit this change of this order as well, just to be consistent there too. And we're going to call this use default unit when rendering selects in the settings page. And maybe I'll do a separate commit for the other one, just because. Adjust order of units in all units to match default unit. Okay. Just in case. Cool. So we fixed that. Before I forget, let me check some of these things off in my notes. So I had notes about a couple of these. Fix default units, check. Redirect to edit exercises, check. I guess that's pretty much it for what we had in here. Cool. Okay, so one other thing I want to do too is this iconography. So let's look at the today page again. We have these sets and it's got these little things where you're editing the parameters for the set, right? Inputs with icons. And like this weight icon means the weight. You're editing the weight parameter. This like ruler is you're editing the distance parameter. But the user is not necessarily like trained to recognize those yet. And kind of what I mean by that is when you're actually creating the exercise, these are listed by name and there's no icon shown here. So at the very least, what I want to do is add the icons for each of these parameters into this form as well, so that there's a correspondence between the pages and the meaning of the icon is a little bit more clear. Ideally in the today page, it would be nice if you could like hover over this and also see the text that way, although that doesn't work very well in mobile. It could be a nice user experience thing for desktop. I don't know if that's possible with the Bulma control stuff, though. Especially since we've got it kind of nested into this mix in here. But I wonder, like, can I just add like an alt? Is that a thing? Icon name? And refresh. It's not, I think alt is what's supposed to like show the little, or is that title? I can never remember. Title? Let me check. Title. Okay, that's not what I want, probably. What about alt? Yeah, this one. Oh no, what? It would be like on the image attribute, I guess. Is that kind of the problem? So like if I look at image, there's an alt, and that is what shows up when I hover over it, right? Or is that the title? I think it's title. But kind of the problem here is what we actually have as an I attribute. Idiomatic text. What? I mean, that in and of itself is kind of odd. So, like this I, originally that was used for italicized text, right? Like when you're writing classic HTML, it would be like italicized. And you would do like B for bold and stuff like that. But in Bulma, the I is actually used for icons, which technically is set off from the normal prose because it's an icon. So it kind of makes sense. But it's kind of feeling like I don't have a good way to add a title to that. Whatever. Anyway, at the very least, we can try to do that, those same icons in the other pages as well. And because we have this icon mix in, we can reuse that. So let's go to our exercise page, and we can say like, in this place where we have like for each parameter, we have this checkbox and then space. And then in here, we would have, let's see, how would we do this? So it would be like space, an extra space, and then an icon. And I'm just going to put in a random thing there. And then it would be the param.name, right? Let's go manage exercises, edit. Okay, so it is a thing. Let's get rid of that title. That doesn't work. And then this would be, so the icon name here is actually going to be the parameter ID, if I recall. So this would be icon param.id. And now we can see those icons here. Reps doesn't have one, which is interesting. If I check off reps and I look at that in the today page, it just has, oh yeah, it has a number. So kind of the problem here is we're using this icon mix-in, but sometimes it's not actually an icon that's being rendered. And part of the reason for this is we're using Tabler icons, the Tabler icon library, and it doesn't actually have that number sign or pound sign or octothorpe, whatever you want to call it, as an icon. So we're just using a textual element. But that's encapsulated in this control logic here, not in the icon mix-in. So I might want to move that and see if I can encapsulate that in the icon mix-in instead, where it's like if icon name equals reps, then we're going to do something. We're going to do like I and just put a pound sign in there. So now if we look at this, or yeah, manage exercises, we get the pound sign. And it's looking kind of weird, but they all do. So probably want to do a little bit of improvements here. But the other thing I can do then now is actually get rid of this check in there. And then go back to the today page, and that should be still working here just fine. So we basically moved that logic into this icon component so that it's reusable. Okay, but in the settings page for a given exercise, we kind of want to do something to just make this look a little better. Sort of call out the icons. So one potential option is like a tag, maybe. Like if we use just a plain light tag here. So that would be, and in that case, we could maybe even get rid of this space, but I'm going to leave that for a moment. So if we do like span tag is light and put the icon in there, what does that look like? Kind of weird. What if we put the parameter name in there as well? It's kind of even weirder. What if we put a space and increase it to medium? How about that? I mean, that's actually not bad. The problem is obviously the checkbox now. Also, the reps one still looks kind of weird. I feel like there needs to be a little bit of padding here. So maybe I'll just actually add another span and do like, use a Bulma padding class here, spacing. So it would be like padding left 1. And then the param name would be like that. Yeah, seems fine. Could also use a margin, doesn't really matter. So now I kind of want the checkbox to be in there, or even having these be Can I hide the checkbox and change the color of these? That might actually look kind of nice. So in which case these might actually be better off as buttons. The problem is with making the buttons though is this is a form submission. So again, we could kind of keep this as a form submission, or we could sort of Ajaxify it. I don't really want to deal with the Ajaxifying it quite yet. So what I could do is maybe say like, I don't know. I think for now I'm just going to change this to is white. And, you know, that's going to make it at least not totally stick out in a weird way. But, and I almost wonder if I should put this all on this label. No, don't like that. Well, let's just get rid of that for now then. If we're just doing a white tag, then it doesn't really give us anything to include it at all. Except that it provides some spacing there. So I could do like .pr1. That didn't really work. Let's actually just leave the tag then. Seems like the best option. Get rid of that extra space. Don't need that. Fine. Okay, so we've got our parameters. Let's just commit this for now, and then we can think about that Ajaxification a little bit. So, yep, so use parameter icons in settings page, in edit exercise page. One other place we could use those is actually in the historical view page. So if we go over here, we can see history, and don't like that really, but we can worry about that later. So, you know, for these reps, weight, distance, and also down in this table, we could maybe use the same type of thing. And I might even want to use the same tag bit, but maybe not. So let's see, historical. So for each of the titles here, we would have like icon param.id and then a space. Yeah, seems fine. And then for up here, we might want to do the same thing, although it might look kind of weird when they're really big. So here we would have plus icon param.id and then a space. I don't know, that actually looks fine. Okay, cool. So now we've got, you know, I think those are all of the places where those parameters are mentioned. There's this page. There's nothing in the settings page or the manage exercises page. And then there's the today page, which obviously already had them. Okay. Add parameter icons to historical page. Cool, let's check that off. consistent use of iconography. Okay, so one of the other things, I'm just going to update this settings page to use Ajax. I kind of just prefer that. Ever since I switched the Today page to doing that, it just feels better to me. Having something where you have to like submit a form to save the changes is, it's easy to forget, especially these days. Like I feel like back in the day on the internet, that was kind of expected. It's like you figure you write the form and then you have to submit it. And sometimes that still makes sense. Like if you're ordering something, it's like you fill out the form and you click purchase or whatever. But for something like this, it's like you kind of want to just switch it and have it switch. You don't want to have to switch it and then remember to save your changes. I would think. Anyway. So let's just do that. Okay, so for the settings page here, what that's going to mean is we're not going to have a post form anymore at all. And we're also not going to have a save changes button. Yeah. And I might add a block here just to give it a bit of spacing. Yeah. And then what we need to do now is adjust these selects so that they actually do something. So if we look at the select mixin, it's kind of ready for Ajax already. We have a signal name and on change options. But those options aren't being used in the settings page here. So the signal name can be kind of whatever. It doesn't really matter. It just has to be unique. So like this could just be like weight, and this could be distance. Has to be unique within this current page, I should say. And then, and maybe I'll call it like weight select and distance select. And then for the on change, it's like what we're going to want to do is a post. And so we have an example of that in the today page where it's like on change, it's doing this thing. And we're going to want to do something kind of similar, except we don't need to reload the page, but I'm just going to copy this. So don't need window reload. And we're going to post to /settings. And, oh yeah, actually I will make this a form. So by having this be content type form, well, let me just show you what this is going to do. It's kind of easier to see it than to explain it. So if I switch this to kilograms, it's actually going to do a post to the settings page and, or, to the settings URL. And it's going to send basically the form data for this thing. So, really I should have this be like, each of these be a separate form. As a user, you probably won't really notice, but it should only be updating the actual value that the user changed. And so now, like if I switch kilograms to pounds, well, we're going to get an error because it's going to say that we need both of them specified. So we're going to need to update that backend logic, but the idea is that it's just sending that new preferred weights value. And if I switch it back to kilograms, it's sending that new value. Okay. So that's pretty simple, but now we need to update the backend logic a bit for settings. So first of all, we're not going to redirect anywhere. Because this is now an Ajax request or, an XHR request where it's happening through JavaScript, it's not actually redirecting the location. We, having a redirect isn't necessary anymore. One sec, gotta ban a spammer here. I've had a few of those lately, like these just spammers showing up in chat. I don't really know if there's something I can do about that, but whatever. Just banning them as they come up. So this is going to be res.send 200 or send status 200. Just saying, hey, we did the thing. It worked, you know? And we're also going to update this to say, you know, these preferred units are both optional. So you don't have to specify both. And because of that, we're also going to need to update this here. We're not necessarily overwriting the whole preferred units object at once. Instead, it's like weight is equal to preferred units dot weight and distance preferred units dot distance. And it's a little bit annoying, but basically if this value isn't set from the body, we're going to need to default it to the value that already exists in the user, which we already have preloaded in every controller method for authentication reasons. So we don't need to do an additional request here. And we can do the same thing for distance. And maybe I'll use the null coalescing. That's usually, I kind of prefer the null coalescing with the double question marks as opposed to using Boolean short-circuiting logic, because for instance, if this weight, if there was a value of weight that was like an empty string or it was false or something like that, the OR logic would treat that as falsy. Whereas with null coalescing, it's only going to use the second value of the operator if the first value is actually undefined or null. So anyway, so this seems fine here. And what are we complaining about? String or undefined is not assignable to type string. And so this would be, this is actually, I'm going to use that default unit function again. Weight and user. And down here, distance and user. And default unit says it returns string or undefined, but it should always return a string. I don't see why this would ever return undefined. And, you know, because it's saying, you know, there's this base case, we could do a throw. Let's just say throw new error. Or we could do, yeah, throw new error or data type, data parameter does not have units. Or maybe we could say something like data type does not have units. Sure. Doesn't really matter. Kind of the point is we should never get to that piece of code unless we've introduced a bug somewhere. So whatever that error message is should be fine. And now TypeScript is happy with this, and it should work kind of as expected, where if I you know, switch this to pounds, it's going to do that request. And we just get a response that says, okay. If I refresh the page, it still says pounds, which shows that the backend was updated. If I switch this to kilometers, refresh the page. Oh yeah, I have to add that to the kilometers one. Forgot to add this thing. We can actually use exactly the same on-change thing. And really, I don't even know if these need a signal, but I'm going to just keep them with a signal just in case. So now if I do kilometers, that updates. I can reload the page. It's still updated. If I go to today, I can see it's using kilometers. Everything seems to be working. So great. let's add this and call this update settings immediately when values are changed instead of requiring form submission. Cool. I like that. And now the manage exercises page is kind of the odd one out. This is the only page now where it's like you really have to submit a form. Obviously, creating an exercise you still do, but here it kind of makes sense because it's like, if I start typing something in here and just like click away from that, I'm not expecting something to happen until I actually click that create new exercises button. As a user, this makes sense to me. But when I'm in here, it's like if I uncheck reps, I kind of want that to just happen. You know, I don't want to have to click save changes for that. So we can try and Ajaxify this part of it as well. This one's going to be a little bit more interesting though, but it's also going to help us in the UI side because we're going to be able to get rid of these checkboxes that I'm not actually a huge fan of and replace them with something better. Okay. So let's give this a bit of a think. So we've got these span tag things, and I'm kind of going to replace, I think, these with buttons. Let me take a look here. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the way the tags look, but the button is the most logical thing. So let's just do that. So these are going to be buttons. And it's going to be, you know, we could say like, let's just say like dot is white. And here we're going to have, you know, we're going to get rid of that, although I kind of want to keep it for my own reference. So I'm actually just going to sort of comment these things out. And then this goes like that. And instead of a control here, we're going to do the same thing that we did earlier where we have like field.is grouped. And then dot control, this is going to go up here. And then indent that, something like that. So now we have these buttons. They look kind of weird. Why do they look weird? Let's get rid of the is white and just, oh, because I don't have the button class on them. Okay, now they look better. So we've got these buttons. And kind of the idea is it's like you can, I want you to be able to click one of these and it's going to add that parameter to the exercise. And the button is also going to toggle, like say this is dark class to indicate that it's now enabled. It's now on. And then if you click it again, it's going to toggle itself off. And if I switch to mobile view here, what the heck? That's not what I would expect. What if I refresh the page? Oh, I see. So this form, this horizontal is grouped thing is not working super well in mobile. If I do it like that, that works well in mobile. And that's actually fine in desktop too. Let's leave it at that for now. Uses a bit more vertical space, but I kind of like it like this. And you could even maybe have some like additional help text afterwards or something. I kind of wish that the reps and like these others were like a bit better aligned with like the width. Well, I can fix that later. Okay, so now we need to actually have these buttons do something, right? So when it's clicked, well, there's a couple things. First, we're going to need it to dynamically change the class. And then we're also, let's work on the clicked part first. So data on click, we're going to do another post. And it's going to be to slash, I guess this. And, you know, this can be like a single quote in there. And then a double quote, we're kind of doing some string interpolation here. And then we need another single quote here. Somehow I got myself into insert mode. There we go. And we can have this be we might want that form content type in here as well for now. Let's just try this. Content type form. And then we're actually going to need it to be a form, or in a form, of course. Thinking about it, that it would work a lot better if this was actually still a checkbox. Let me try something here. So if I just uncomment these for a moment, it's going to look weird. If I do a style display hidden, does that work on the checkbox? Doesn't seem like it. Or it would be display none, right? What if I just try that here? Display none. That does work. Let's actually try doing it this way. So we're going to have a form for the parameters. And in here, we're going to have a field. And then for each parameter, we're going to have a checkbox. And then this is just going to be the button. Something like that. So now, you know, we actually have these. Well, I don't like that, but what happened there? I think let's get rid of that form there. I think it might be messing things up a little bit, and get rid of this as well. Not going to need that anymore. So now if I click one of these, well, it's still submitting. I don't really like that it's actually submitting the form. And the reason that's happening is maybe because this is actually within the checkbox still. I wonder if I put this here, and I can format that better later. What about now? What's it going to do? It's still doing the thing. So data on change. So it should be, let's preserve log. Let's see, if we click reps, So I don't really know how these checkbox things actually work. Let's see. MDN checkbox. This should be 4, shouldn't it? Does that fix anything? So now if I click it, no. I wonder if I just change this to a tag real fast, or a div with the class of tag, and click it. Okay, so now it's not actually doing anything at all, which isn't what we want either. Let's see. So this is listening to change, which we have here, data on change. But it's not doing what I would expect it to do here. Let's see. So click it. Let's take a look at what it actually has going on here. Data on change. The checked value, that's really weird too. I guess that kind of makes sense. Okay, well, I kind of wanted to keep these as checkboxes, but I'm actually just going to not have them be checkboxes anymore. And go back to the approach where it's like a button. Seems like the simplest. Kind of the problem here is we're going to need to change the back end a little bit more than if we could reuse a lot of the same logic. So here now, we've got these buttons, data on click, get rid of the form, and unindent that. Refresh. So now we should be able to click and nothing actually happens. And if we change this to data on click, and we click, something should happen. Post is not defined. Is that not, like if we go down here, oh, it's got an at, okay. Okay, at post. Hopefully that wasn't interfering with my previous testing too. So now if I click one of these, what's it complaining about now? Yeah, it's complaining about not finding a form. Let's get rid of the content type form. And now if I click one, it's sending the request and we're getting an error. So I'm actually going to copy this. Let's try going back to what we had before and making this an at. And just taking a look and see if that, yeah, it's still the same problem. Or is it? Yes, it is. Okay, anyway, so let's redo all that. Which my redo is not working. I'll just do that. Okay. So we can do our thing now, and it should, let's unreserve the log, refresh here, try clicking something. Oh, right. Another thing I needed to undo. And then I try clicking something and we get the right thing going on here. So what we can see here now is that we have, so the default behavior for this @post helper, which is part of the data star library, is that it's sending all of the signals on the whole page, which is why that content type theme thing is kind of nice because it limits it to only sending the signals for, or content type form, I mean, only sending the signals for that particular form. But there are still other ways to do that. So let's take a look here. So if we use @post, we can pass in options. And let's see what these options are. So previously we did content type form. Instead, I think we're going to want to I don't know. Can I not just like send only the one thing? It's kind of annoying. It's kind of very annoying. Well, let's just keep going with this approach for a moment and see how it feels. So basically I would have like a data. Well, you know, I could do something where it's like post here and and include a query parameter or something. It's kind of weird, but let's just try it. Let's see how that works. So say we did question mark plus param dot ID equals true. Let's just do that. See what it does. So I click reps, does the thing. And really, like, I don't want all of that other stuff. So I wish there was like a slightly different helper method approach for this, but whatever. If I actually do content type form, you know, let's try it this way. So I'm just going back and forth on this a lot, but let's copy this. Let's go back to what we had before and go forward a bit again. And so here we have this, and we're also going to add a selector, which is the specifies a form. It doesn't really say if it's the ID of the form or the name. I guess it doesn't really matter. And the selector would be, well, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work actually. Kind of annoying. But if I just did this form as kind of like a weird standalone thing. Because basically what I don't want it to do is send any signals. Name params. And then this selector is params. Although really I could also just maybe do it like this. Because now that these are buttons, they're not actually going to go into the form at all. Okie doke. Kind of a pain. What are we complaining about now? There is no param.id. Is that it? Oh, I'm missing the each param in all parameters. So now, you know, we click it. The actual payload has got nothing in it. And we're passing in this value in the query string. It's kind of really janky. The other option we could do is avoid using this @post at all and just do like a fetch. So what if we did that? Let's see what that looks like. Got to look up the fetch spec because just got to look everything up usually. So fetch, the first parameter is a URL. That much I remember, which would be this. And then the second parameter is like a kind of, need a plus there, and another, yeah, that should be fine. What is it complaining about now? Oh, I need another quote there, right? Of course. Okay, so for fetch, the first parameter is the URL, and the second parameter is like a object potentially. Let's just look at the function here, an object of options. And so let's see what options we can have in here. We're going to want a body, and the body is going to be a, you know, this could be a form data object, I guess. It's kind of annoying to have to do it that way. So I might just do like that JSON, like a JSON approach, JSON.stringify. And, you know, just for a test, we could just do like foo bar. And, right, and that would be inside a body. Body. And we would need like a method post. Method post. And let's see what that does. So now if I click on one of these, gotta get rid of the form. Now if I click on one of these, it does a post. That's good. The payload is a body. It's a JSON object. That's good. The content type is text plain. That's not great. I want my content type to be application JSON. Or I could do this. URL encoded. Maybe I'll just do this. So either way, we're going to need headers. Headers. Content type. URL encoded. And body would be, I didn't know you could actually do this. New URL search params. Seems pretty convenient. Like that. right? So now if I do this again, click, it's going to do the thing. We get our form data. So now let's actually look at the server and see what's going on there. So this would be in exercises ID post. So I'm just going to do like console.log rec.body and see what we get here. Send one. It gets parsed into an object nicely. That's good. So we have the right middlewares in Express to parse that. And then obviously we don't want to just return foo bar. We need to return the, or provide the get rid of that extra quote. We need to provide the param.id. And then the value here needs to be either true or false. And it's going to be true. Well, this is actually going to need to be a signal. So we're not going to interpolate a value. It's going to be like $param.id something like that. And we're also going to need to actually assign this. So it would be like $param.id equals not, or just not, something like that. And getting into some really confusing JavaScript generation here. So let's make sure that we're actually getting the right values. So we've got like $reps equals not reps, and then fetch reps equals reps. Yeah, something like that. And so then we would also have like a data signals then an object. And let's put these on some new lines here just to make it a little bit better. And this would be like param.id is let's just start with false, and then we can, we're going to need to check that in the actual, like, let's look at the, look over here. So we've got this check logic where it's like exercise.parameters.find. We're going to need to reuse that logic here. And, we're going to add a not to convert it into a Boolean. And then the other final thing here is like a data class where we say like, how does data class work again? Right. So there would be like a data class is, or let's do it this way. So yeah, let's do it this way. Is dark is set when $param.id. And it's kind of annoying that we have to do this like interpolation stuff. The reason that this has to happen is we're dynamically generating the name of the signal based on the param.id value. So it's not a hard-coded signal name. And we're doing that because this is inside a for loop. So if we unrolled this, where we wrote this same code a separate time once for each parameter and manually wrote in the param.id, it would be more readable, but obviously a lot more duplicative as well. Complaining about something. Oh, yeah, need a plus there. Okay, so now, I mean, you can kind of see what I was going for here, hopefully, where it's like it's dark if it's selected. Also, though, for some reason, these fields are now looking, it's not looking as good as it was before. Why was it vertical before? I don't even remember anymore. Am I missing a dot control? Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so now it's like, if you click it, it toggles it. And if we look at what's being sent to the back end here, so like right now, wait is false. If I click it, then the next thing is sending wait true. If I click it again, sending wait false. And you know, this logic isn't actually doing anything on the back end yet. And when I refresh it, it's like the default selection here is based on what currently is in the server. So if I look at the today page, you can see we've got like reps, wait, and distance. And if I go manage, we can see that those are correctly selected here. Okay. And, you know, maybe I'll just do like a MB1 to give them a little bit of space. Okay. And I don't really like the dark. I could do light or like this, success. What does that look like? Yeah, that seems fine. Okay. And so then we need to update the backend. So let's go back here. So what we're getting here is there's, you know, maybe a name, and we haven't even done the name part yet, but that's optional. And then there's this all parameters declaration schema. And this is defined here. And this is kind of different now because it's no longer an enum of on. It would be a enum of true or false, which is, you know, I think you can just do like a Boolean. And it's already flagged as optional in there. So we should be able to now get our parameters. So the problem here, though, is we're only sending them one parameter at a time from the client. Hello. We're only sending them one parameter at a time from the client, but this code is assuming that we're going to be sending the current state of all of the parameters that are selected. So what we need to do is actually change this, basically. And there's some ways that we could change it, but I feel like I might actually just kind of adjust the behavior where instead of iterating through all of the parameters, we might assume that there's only one parameter set. And really, maybe this should be another route, a separate route, but I'm not going to worry about that. So I wonder if there's a way in the schema to be like just one of all these things. Instead of making it an object, not sure. Only one parameter set. I'm doing well. How about you? Just in some little bit of soup right now trying to refactor this controller method. So instead of doing this for const parameter of all parameters, if body ID push, we're going to say if the body ID, well, I mean, we could do that. Kind of the problem here is when we're setting this parameters, we're going to need this to be equal to the existing parameter's value with the change of just this other parameter, which honestly is kind of a pain and makes me think so we kind of have two options here, okay? We can either, in this controller method, we can load the current state of this exercise and mutate the parameter based on that. And kind of the reason that we need to do this is because this parameters is a JSON-B object in the database. So we can't granularly update a property in there very easily without updating the whole value. If we had separate columns for each parameter, there was just like a Boolean column, this would be a lot easier, but we don't. Or on the client, we could actually send in all of the different parameters in the body, which is kind of how that $post thing works. So sort of as an example here, oh, nice. Yeah. I like working on sites, as you might imagine. Let's refactor this. So we're still going to set that. Going to get rid of all that. And I'm actually just going to put that in a comment so I don't lose it forever. What? Oh. And what we're going to do instead here is, I don't really get why that's quoted that way. Let's see what this is actually going to look like here. Yeah, seems fine. Just a syntax highlighting issue, I guess. So what we're actually going to do here is instead do a post, @post, like we had before, to this value. And that's it. So now if we click on one of these, it's doing a post. And what we get is all of the signals in the page shown at once. So with this way, the client is serving as the source of truth of which things are selected and which things are not. The problem with this is we get some of these other signals in here that I don't want. But I might just have to live with that for now. There is a way to like fix that maybe using an underscore, a local parameter, but I don't, or a local signal, but I don't really know how that works. Local. Doesn't really tell me anything. Reference. Okay, not included in backend by default. That's actually exactly what we want. So for everywhere we have like $theme, we're going to want this to have an underscore in it. And so now if I click one of these, we should see the, okay, theme is still there for some reason. That is how you do it, right? Signals beginning with an underscore are considered local. Oh, I probably need to refresh the page. It still has a theme in there. Why is that? Oh, because it's defined up here as well. I guess let's do that. Click. Okay, so now the themes are gone, and we need to do the same thing for show nav menu. If I get rid of that, let's see. Theme and not whole word. So there's that, there's that, there's that, that. Yeah, seems fine. If I do show nav menu, sounds like fire alarm's going off. One sec. Okay, I'm back. There's some cooking going on in the kitchen and it set off the fire alarm. No big deal. Okay, and so these show nav menus all need that underscore as well. So underscore there, there, need another underscore there, there, another underscore there. And then over here, gosh, there's a lot of these in this one line. Okay, underscore there. And then one down here. So now all of the show nav menus have an underscore, right? Right. Okay. Great. So with that, let's do a quick test here to make sure those signals are still working. We can switch to dark mode. Those look kind of weird in dark mode, apparently. And we can switch back to light mode. That works. And if we open mobile view, we can still show and hide the nav menu. That works. And if we click this, you know, we only actually have those things that we care about. So that's looking great. Yeah, mobile view, it's definitely tricky. It's one of the nice things about using a CSS framework is that, you know, there's responsive behavior built in for a lot of the different components, but that only gets you part of the way there, obviously. For this app in particular, because, you know, when people are tracking exercises, they're mostly going to be doing that from their phone, probably, in my head, like from the gym. So I definitely want to make sure the mobile view works, arguably even better than the desktop view. Oh, nice. Yeah, that's always a good feeling when you get the mobile view working just right, especially if it's like you weren't even thinking about it and you just, it turns out it works perfectly fine. Let's see here. Right. Okay. Let's actually finish doing this exercises front end piece here as well. So I'm going to get rid of this fetch because that wasn't working as well as what we've got now. We also need a onChange thing for this input, this name input. And so here we're going to have a data signal on this. And, you know, we don't need it to be that fancy. It can be like data signals name exercise.name. And then we also have a data bind name, and we can also have a well, let's just start there. So now if I click on one of these guys, it's not happy about something. What are you not happy about? Oh, probably this needs to be quoted. It's kind of annoying. Yeah. Okay. So now network, click. So we should have all of the parameters and then also the name. Oh, that delete modal one. I also need to, that should be a local signal. Delete modal. Let's just do a find and replace here. Yeah. Replace all. Okie doke. So now we have really only the things that we actually want in here. And, you know, so now we need to actually have something where when this name is changed, we update the backend. And here you could have, you know, you could use an on change event where if the user changes the value and then blurs the field, like clicks away from the field, then it's sent. Or you can use an on input event where every time the user types in the field, something is sent. And I actually like to use that on input approach here, but with a debounce. So I'm going to use the same thing that I have for some of these other things where we're going to add a data on input debounce. And here we're just going to do this exact same thing. And let's put this in their own lines to make it a little bit more readable. So now, what did I do? Right, that would just be name. Actually, that doesn't need to have that bit at all. Just do the post. Okay, so now, you know, if I change this value here, it's going to send the request. But you notice I typed in 4 characters and it only sent the request once because it's got logic in there to debounce at a 500 millisecond interval, meaning that it's going to wait 500 milliseconds before sending another request. So we don't spam our backend. But as the user, you know, you don't have to remember to click away to get that to save. Okay, fine. Now we kind of need to actually get the backend to properly be able to handle these things. And I'm normally I go about 2 hours, so I'm a little bit over time in terms of wrapping up here, but I kind of want to finish up this feature and then I'm going to call it. Okay, so that is no longer true. And also, really, these are no longer optional. There should always be all of them. And then this is right. That should be fine. And that should just be body.name, really. So we're using the validated body object instead of using the unvalidated request.body object. Okay, and that is also should not be optional anymore. Great. So let's try this. So now if I click reps, what are you complaining about? Name. Why are you not happy with that? Let me do a log of the request.body again, just to see what we've got here. It's an empty object. Why is it an empty object? The request payload here is application JSON. So it seems like I might not have a JSON parser middleware set up. So that's an easy enough thing to add. Just going to go up here to the top of the file here and add an express.json. And we don't need any parameters for that. That should fix that. One of the nice things about Express, yep, now we've got all the values nicely, is, you know, in your controllers, you're just referencing the body object, but the way that that body object is populated depends on the content type of the request. And all you need to do is have the right middlewares in place to be able to support different content types where they're all serialized or deserialized to the same JSON structure in your actual controller method. So with that, I feel like we should have something that works actually. The only other thing here is we don't need to redirect anymore because this is an XHR request once again. So we're just going to send status 200 when we're done. And so now, you know, if I set wait and assisted and refresh the page, those are now set. And if I update the dumbbell curl name, refresh the page, it's now set. Seems good. One thing I want to fix before I stop here is this flash. So the default class for these parameters, let's look at the code here so I can explain this, is this is white. But there's a signal that sets that is success class if the parameter.id signal is true. But because that's client-side code, the initial DOM render is always going to have this is white, whether the parameter is set or not. So what we need to do to fix that is update our pug template to actually set the class on the server while the DOM is rendered, or while the HTML is rendered, based on this value. So maybe I'll actually even do, let me look here at an example. Yeah, like this hyphen thing to make this a variable. So I could do like var param is set equals that. And then I can use that here. And I can use that here as well. Param is set. If that's true, then it would be is success. And if it's false, it would be just nothing, I guess. It's fine. Because this is white is also going to be included in there to begin with. So now you can see it doesn't have that flash when I refresh the page. If I click to add something, that also works. If I click to remove something, that still works. So looks good. Yeah, seems good. Okay, so let's just commit all this in one commit and call it use XHR request in settings page instead of form submission. Actually, it's not the settings page. Let me amend that in edit exercise page. Okay. And oh yeah, did I leave a console.log in there? Yeah, let's get rid of that. And amend the commit again. Okie doke. And let's check the notes, see if there's anything else to check off here. So not really. That switching away from using the form, that wasn't really something I had planned on doing, but I think it helps a lot. So I think we're ready to just push our changes. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up for today. Thanks, y'all. See you next week. Actually, let me respond to this real fast. Sorry, I'm about to sign off, but maybe next time.